He kissed her that morning. That same evening, he pushed her off a cliff. You have to understand the Frostlands if you want to understand what happened to Lyriel Voss. Picture a world carved entirely from ice and old pride, where wolf packs ruled the way certain families back home ruled everything, loudly, completely, with the unspoken understanding that there was a right kind of blood and a wrong kind, and everyone knew which was which. The Silverfang pack sat at the top of that order, their alpha king, Garrick Ironfang. He was the kind of man who filled a room the way a cold front fills a valley. You felt him before you saw him. Tall, dark-haired, eyes like hammered gold. The kind that made you feel chosen when they landed on you, and small when they looked away. Lyriel had felt chosen for 3 years. She was 24. Silver hair that caught moonlight like frost on a window pane. Pale blue eyes she had always considered her plainest feature. She was an Omega, lowest rank in the pack. The kind of rank that meant you were useful, tolerated, occasionally pitied, never truly seen. She had grown up knowing what she was in their world, the way some women grow up knowing which chair at the dinner table wobbles, and just quietly avoid it, year after year, without ever making a fuss about it. But Garrick had looked at her differently, or so she had believed. That morning, just that morning, he had stood before the entire pack in the Great Hall and stroked her silver hair in front of every pair of wolf eyes in the Frostlands. His voice low, almost reverent. "You are the only Omega I accept," he said. "You are mine, forever." She felt it in her chest, that warm, spreading certainty. The kind you get when you find the right piece of a puzzle you have been working on for years. Everything clicking into place, everything finally making sense. She had been wrong about all of it. What Lyriel was clutching as she stood at the edge of the abyssal cliffs that night was not a weapon. It was a small folded square of pale cream linen, no bigger than a handkerchief, stitched with a tiny wolf crest in silver thread. Garrick had pressed it into her palm the night he first called her his. She had carried it every single day since. Her fingers would not let go of it even now, even as the blizzard tore at her hair, even as Garrick stood 10 feet away and looked at her the way you look at a coffee ring on an important document. A nuisance to be blotted out, nothing more. The pack stood behind him in a long, silent line, watching. She had not cried yet. That surprised her. There was something happening inside her chest that was bigger than crying. A deep, strange burning, like a coal buried for years that was finally, reluctantly, catching. She had felt it before, in small flickers. She had never understood what it was. "He called me a stain on the wolf pack," Lyriel whispered. Her voice was not shaking. It was something quieter than shaking, broken in a way that had gone past trembling and come out the other side. "He needed to humiliate me publicly to strengthen his claim to purity." She paused. "But the ones the light throws away, the dark always finds them first." She did not know why she said that. It rose from somewhere underneath language, from the burning thing in her chest. Garrick's golden eyes were flat. He gripped the amulet at his throat. Heavy, black, always there, always between them. The forbidden blood amulet. A secret she had never been invited to know. "You are nothing but a fragile vessel," he said, almost pleasant, "and I have already ensured you are useless to everyone." He shoved her, one hand flat against her sternum, and the ground disappeared. The wind hit her like a wall of glass. The cold was absolute. Not the kind that stings, the kind that erases. The way a hard January can erase an entire afternoon on a porch you always meant to fix the railing on. The abyssal cliffs dropped away into darkness so complete she could not tell where the snow ended and the void began. The burning thing in her chest erupted. Not painfully, something beyond pain, like a door rusted shut for 24 years being torn from its hinges all at once. And then, in the howling dark, somewhere inside the sound of her own heartbeat, she heard a voice, ancient, quiet, certain, eternal vessel. You carry something inside your blood that has been waiting longer than you have been alive. But if you refuse to embrace it, if you close yourself off from the darkness that is yours by birth, you will turn to ash in the snow before you reach the bottom. Half a second to process that. She was falling at 100 miles an hour. The man she had loved had just pushed her off a cliff, and apparently she was something else entirely. Something old and enormous, and she had never known. The linen square was still in her hand. She let it go. And then something came out of the sky. Before we go any further, Garrick knew exactly what Lyriel was worth, and he chose to destroy her anyway. 2 words in the comments. Forgive him or let him freeze. She had 3 seconds before impact. And what came out of that sky would change everything she thought she knew about fate, about blood, about who she was always meant to become. Time stopped. Not the way it stops in a dream, slow, gauzy, half-remembered. It stopped the way it stops when you hear the phone ring at 2 in the morning, sharp, complete, every nerve suddenly paying full attention. The wings came first, massive, black as the space between winter stars. They tore through the blizzard from above with a sound like a thunderclap wrapped in velvet, scattering snow in great spiraling arcs. And in the space between one heartbeat and the next, before Lyriel's body had fully understood it was supposed to die, a pair of arms caught her. Solid, unyielding, like the oak beams of a house built to outlast every storm that ever came. She could not breathe. Not from fear, from shock so sudden it felt physical. The kind you get when you drop your mother's china gravy boat and a hand shoots out from nowhere and catches it before it hits the floor. The man holding her looked down, eyes the color of old garnets, deep red, ancient. He adjusted his hold with the careful, deliberate attention of someone who understood the weight of something irreplaceable. "Who are you?" Lyriel whispered, her voice scraped thin by cold. His voice was low, unhurried. It arrived against her ear like warmth from a hearth that had been burning a very long time. "Someone who found you," he said. "That is enough for now." His name was Cassian Draven, Vampire King. Older than the wolf clans themselves, older than the blood covenants carved into the stone walls of the Frostlands, older than every law and grudge and whispered prophecy spoken in this world. He wore that age the way certain men wear their years, quietly, without apology, with a stillness that made younger people nervous and older people feel inexplicably at ease. His home, Ebon Nocturne Castle, rose from a cluster of ancient storm clouds above the snowline. Dark stone and silver mist and the particular silence you only find in very old places, like a cathedral at 6 in the morning before anyone else arrives. Lyriel woke in a room that smelled of cedar and cold candle wax, wrapped in a blanket that felt as if it had been warming by a fire before someone thought to put it on her. She was on her feet and at the door in about 4 seconds. Cassian was already there. Not blocking, simply present. The way still water is present, without effort, but with the quiet weight of something very deep beneath it. Her eyes were red, her silver hair tangled. She was shaking, and not entirely from cold. "I have to go back," she said, firmer than she felt. "Garrick is... The pack is my home. I have to go back." "Fate," Cassian said quietly, "does not throw away the one it loves." That stopped her. She stood with one hand on the doorframe and felt those words land somewhere tender and undefended inside her. The way an unexpected kindness can sit you right down in a grocery store parking lot and make you cry over nothing at all. She blinked hard. She would not cry in front of this stranger. "If I don't belong to the wolves," she said slowly, the words strange in her mouth, like a question she had been afraid to ask for years. "Then where do I belong?" Cassian moved to the narrow window, looked out at the cloud-wrapped darkness below. A long pause. Then he turned, and she saw something in his face she had not expected. Not power, not the cool authority of a man who had ruled for centuries. She saw loneliness, the specific, bone-deep kind that belongs to someone who has watched every person they ever cared about turn to dust. The way a widow looks at an empty chair on a Tuesday evening when the house is too quiet and the television is only noise. He lifted his wrist, bit through the skin. Clean, deliberate. The way you break the seal on something that has been kept a long time. And held it near her. One drop of immortal blood moved toward the burning essence in her chest as if it knew exactly where it was going. The raging fire inside her quieted, not extinguished, steadied. "A blood bond," Silas said from the doorway. Lyriel startled. She had not heard him enter. "Freely given, not a contract, a tether, to keep the essence from burning through you before you understand what you carry." Warmth spread through her veins like a heating vent finally kicking on after a long, cold ride, spreading from the center outward until her shoulders came down from around her ears. She stood very still and breathed. And then the castle walls shook. The sound came from below, low, rhythmic, unmistakable. The thunder of 1,000 wolf paws crossing frozen ground. Garrick had not wasted time. Cassian moved to the window. His expression did not change. The expression of someone who has watched armies come and go for centuries and has long since stopped being surprised by them. "He is here for you," Cassian said. "He does not want me," Lyriel said. "He never did. He wants what is inside me." "Yes." Cassian turned. "That is why he cannot have you." He reached into his coat and drew out a locket. Small, silver, old beyond reckoning. He opened it, and inside, barely visible, a single dark drop, dried, preserved for a very long time. "This is your blood," he said, "from a life before this one. I have carried it for 1,000 years because I knew this day would come." He closed the locket. "You are not an Omega, Lyriel. You never were." Before she could speak, Silas stepped forward. His voice filled the room the way deep water fills a well. Complete, with no space left over. "The essence she carries is not merely a power. It is the reborn soul of the vampire ancestor, the founding force of all immortal blood. It awakened because of her ancient hybrid lineage. She is the eternal vessel, and there is a blood covenant that cannot be completed without her." That is why Garrick has always been afraid of what she might become. The silence after that was considerable. And then Lyriel's chest detonated. The essence erupted outward from her sternum like a winter sun cracking ice from the inside. The sound that left her was not grief, not rage, not fear. Something older and larger than all three. Her eyes, pale blue all her life, began burning violet at the edges, the new color rising from somewhere very deep, like a light coming on in a room that had been dark a very long time. Below the castle, Garrick's army pressed forward. Above, the storm clouds parted, and the vampire moon appeared. Full, silver, enormous, flooding the Frostlands in cold light. Something was beginning that could not be stopped. Drop one word below, What do you think is really inside that locket? The answer coming up will surprise you. Cassian had kept that drop of her blood for 1,000 years, and the secret behind why is darker and more beautiful than anything Lyriel had imagined. Keep watching. The battle came to the abyssal cliffs, the way everything terrible does. Fast, and with a sound you feel in your back teeth before your mind has caught up to it. Garrick Ironfang had not ridden alone. The Silverfang army stretched across the frozen plateau in a long, dark line, armor catching the blizzard light like a row of old coins laid out on black velvet. 1,000 wolves, maybe more. The kind of gathering that meant Garrick intended this to be final. The forbidden blood amulet burned at his throat, pulsing a sickly amber in the dark, and the wolves behind him moved with the unified silence of absolute obedience. They were waiting for one thing: her. Lyriel stood at the cliff's edge, the same edge, with Cassian at her left and Silas at her right. The full weight of what she was pressing outward from her chest, like something trying to push through a locked door. Her violet eyes still changing, the blue burning away at the edges, the new color rising from somewhere very old. She was terrified, and for the first time in her life, she was not pretending otherwise. Silas stepped forward. His voice carried the kind of authority that does not need volume. The way a single sentence from the right person in a quiet room can stop a whole crowd dead. "This ends here," he said. "Lyriel Voss is the key to the Blood Covenant. To raise a hand against her is to raise a hand against the oldest law in this world." A ripple moved through the wolf army. Uncertainty. The kind that passes through a crowd when the person everyone was following suddenly looks less certain than he did a moment ago. Garrick did not flinch. He never flinched. That was part of what had made her love him. That absolute, practiced certainty. The way he moved through every room as though he had already decided how it would end. She had mistaken that for strength for 3 years. She understood now what it actually was. Not strength. Control. The specific, cold control of a man who plans every outcome and leaves nothing to chance, including the people around him. The memory arrived without warning. 1 second she was standing in the blizzard. The next she was somewhere else entirely. The past dropping down over her present like a film suddenly switching reels. She saw herself younger, standing beneath a sky full of falling snow. Garrick's arms around her. She remembered the warmth of him. The particular, careful warmth of someone who had studied exactly how cold you had been, and had decided to make you trust him because of it. "You are mine," he had whispered, "forever." She had believed him with everything she had. The memory snapped back. The blizzard returned. The army was still there. Garrick's smirk had come back. The easy, practiced smirk of a man who considers himself already finished with a problem. His hand tightened on the amulet. "I have always known what you were," he said. Conversational, almost pleasant. "From the night I first saw you, I knew the essence was waking in your blood. I spent 3 years using this amulet to suppress it, pushing it back down every time it tried to surface, keeping you small, keeping you dependent, keeping you exactly where you could not become a threat to my rule." He paused, letting that settle. When the amulet reached its limit and the suppression could no longer hold, I made a choice. A public humiliation before the entire pack. It had to be complete. Had to be devastating enough that you would collapse inward and never rise. It was never personal. Lyriel. His voice did not waver. It was strategy. The silence after that was the silence of a room after something irreplaceable shatters on a stone floor. Lyriel's knees met the ice. Not from weakness. The body sometimes needs a moment to absorb what the mind has just been handed. Like finding something in an old coat pocket that tells you a story about your own life that you never knew was being written. She pressed one palm flat against the frozen ground and breathed. Every warm moment she had kept folded inside her memory, his hand in her hair, his voice saying her name. The feeling of being chosen after a lifetime of being overlooked. Each one replayed now with the sound off and the truth turned up. The warmth revealed as engineering, the tenderness revealed as technique. She had not been loved, she had been managed. "You knew," she said, steadier than she felt. "You knew what I was capable of becoming, and so you made sure I never believed it myself." A sound left her throat, not quite a word, not quite a cry. The sound of a grief that has been sitting in a locked room for years and has just been given a door. Then she lifted her head. Her chin came up slow, her shoulders straightened by degrees. Like something inside her that had been folded small for a very long time was finally, carefully, opening back up. "I spent 3 years believing I was worthless because you told me so." Her voice did not shake. "I understand now that was never the truth about me. That was only ever the truth about what you were afraid of." The essence answered. It erupted, not as fire, as light. Dark, rich, violet silver. The light of something ancient coming fully awake, pouring outward through the blizzard like a house lit from every window simultaneously. It pressed outward across the plateau. The Silverfang army took a collective step back, and even Garrick, for one unguarded second, looked like a man who has just realized the ice he is standing on is thinner than he thought. He dropped to one knee, not by choice. The raw gravitational weight of the essence forced him down. The way centuries of accumulated consequence eventually press a man flat, regardless of how long he has been avoiding the reckoning. His golden eyes found hers, and in them, just at the edge, just for a moment, she saw something she had never expected. Not arrogance, not cruelty. Shame. Cassian stepped close. He raised one hand and laid it gently over her eyes, not to shield her from Garrick, but to give her somewhere else to look. A quiet signal. "You do not owe him your attention. You don't have to watch," he said softly. "You have already won." She leaned into that hand, not because she could not stand on her own. She could. But she had been standing entirely alone in a crowd for 3 years. And the feeling of someone choosing to stand beside her, not using her, not managing her, simply being there, was something she had not known she was starving for until this exact moment. Like a porch swing that still creaks the way it did 30 years ago. Like the smell of apple pie from a neighbor's kitchen on a Sunday when you thought the whole street was empty. But the essence did not stop. It poured outward past the edges of the cliff, past the storm, spreading across the frostlands in great rolling waves. Too much, too fast, too enormous for the vessel meant to hold it. She could feel it pulling at everything. Wolves, stone, the ancient boundary between this world and whatever lay on the other side of it. Cassian felt the shift. She saw it in the slight tightening of his jaw. The first crack in a composure that had held for 10 centuries. "Lyriel." His voice dropped. "You have to pull it back." "I am trying," she said through her teeth. But 24 years of suppression, when finally released, does not remember how to be gentle. The essence had been kept in a locked room too long. It did not know the size of the world yet. It only knew that it was finally, completely free. And it was spreading, far across the plateau. Garrick was still on one knee, watching the darkness roll outward in all directions. And for the first time, something moved across his face that looked less like strategy and more like fear. He slid his hand into his coat, slowly, where something old and dark had been waiting all along. He had one more move. He had always had one more move. Comment below. Did you see Garrick's final move coming? One word. Yes or no? Garrick had one last weapon hidden, and what he does with it in the next 60 seconds will put every life in the Frostlands at risk. Do not go anywhere. The sun went out. Not gradually. Not the way it fades in winter while you are still at the kitchen sink thinking it is only 4 o'clock. It went all at once, swallowed whole by a tide of vampiric darkness that rolled outward from Lyriel's chest like the shadow of something truly enormous passing overhead. One moment the blizzard was silver and gray. The next, the sky was the color of a clock that has stopped. The vampiric blood eclipse had begun. The wolves felt it first, the ability to shift. That primal, bone-deep certainty that had defined the wolf clans for centuries simply went silent. One by one, across the plateau, seasoned warriors dropped to their knees as the animal inside them switched off. Like a radio cutting to static. Like the power going out across an entire neighborhood at once. Every house dark simultaneously. Everyone standing at their windows with candles, confused and suddenly uncertain of what they had always taken for granted. The vampire shadows stretched and expanded. Ancient immortal silhouettes filled the sky above the cliffs. Dark wings spread wide, inhabiting the eclipse the way creatures do who have always preferred this quality of light. And at the center of all of it, Lyriel. The ancient essence had completed its full awakening. The last lock broken. Every suppression burned away. She was the eternal sovereign now, not by ambition, not by want, but by blood older than this world's oldest laws. She had not asked for any of it. She felt none of the power she was supposed to feel. She felt the edges of herself dissolving. "Cassian," she said, very quietly, "I cannot hold the boundary." And then Garrick laughed. It was not a good sound. The laugh of a man who has nothing left to lose and has decided that if he goes down, the entire structure comes with him. Blood was running freely from his eyes now. The forbidden blood amulet cracked apart against his chest, its suppression magic finally, completely spent after 3 years of forcing the essence back down. The backlash tearing through him like a storm through a house with no walls left. He raised both hands. What formed in the air around him was old, wrong-colored. The wrongness you feel in your stomach before your mind has named it. The way a smell through a neighbor's window at 2 in the morning tells you something is very badly off before you have registered what you are smelling. The forbidden shadow curse. Not spoken aloud in 500 years. Not because it had been forgotten, but because even those who hated the world had considered it too absolute a destruction to use. It was designed to do one specific thing: use the essence itself as a conduit, pouring annihilation outward in all directions through the very bloodline it had been meant to protect. Total consumption. Wolf and vampire alike, burned to nothing. The Frostlands reduced to stone and permanent silence. "If I cannot hold it," Garrick said. His voice had gone flat and strange, drained of everything except the specific ugliness of a man who would rather own ruins than lose what he considers his. "Then no one will." The supernatural world trembled. Silas threw up a containment ward, silver light, ancient words. But the curse was already moving. Already threading its dark fingers through the cracks in Lyriel's dissolving control, using the very openings the eclipse had created. The wolves who had been kneeling scattered backward. Even the immortal shadows above the cliffs drew in their wings. There was no posture of power in the face of this thing. There was only recognition. Cassian did not hesitate. He brought his own hand to his mouth and bit. Not the careful, measured break of before, but deep. The way you act when the cost is real and you pay it with full knowledge of what it means. Dark, immortal blood welled up, nearly black in the eclipsed light. He pressed his palm flat against Lyriel's sternum, over the essence, over the earthquake inside her. The bond deepened into something beyond language. It was not warmth, exactly. It was more like the specific quality of certainty. 1,000 years of survival, of choosing to endure, of finding reasons to remain present in a world that had stripped him of everyone he had ever kept close. Flowing through that bond and into her. Not given as a gift, given as proof. I have been through worse than this, and I am still here. So will you be. And inside that flood of shared memory, the essence showed her something. 2 futures, side by side, as specific and undeniable as 2 photographs laid on a kitchen table. The first, she releases the essence fully, matches the shadow curse with everything she has, and the powers cancel each other in the worst possible way. Not neutralized, but multiplied, tearing outward through every living thing on the Frostlands until there is nothing left but ash-gray snow over empty stone. The wolves gone. The vampires gone. The cliffs standing over a silence that would last until something new grew in the ruins. In 100 years, or 200, with no one left who remembered what had been here. The second. Snow falling. Not a blizzard. The quiet. Considered kind. The kind that falls on a Sunday afternoon when you have nowhere to be and the house is warm. Wolves and vampires standing side by side under a sky that held both moonlight and the first pale suggestion of dawn. Imperfect. Complicated. Alive. 3 seconds. She did not weigh power against power. She did not think about Garrick, or the throne, or what she had survived, or what she deserved. She thought about the linen square she had carried for 3 years, the way it had felt in her hand on the way down, and the way her hand had felt without it. Lighter. My pain, she said. Her voice came from the very still center of the storm inside her, from somewhere that had been quiet and certain all along, even when everything else was fire. Is not worth the destruction of the world, she breathed in. I forgive. Not for him. A pause, barely a second. For myself, to set myself free. The shadow curse shattered. Not faded, shattered. The way ice breaks when exactly the right note reaches it, sudden and complete, leaving no residue. The wrongness in the air went out of the air. The eclipse began to lift, darkness retreating to its proper edges, vampire shadows folding their wings and descending slowly. The wolf shift returned across the Silver Fang army in trembling waves, warriors gasping with the return of something they had always had and had never once thought to be grateful for. Garrick collapsed. Not with drama, not with a final speech. He simply collapsed. The way a man does when there is nothing structural left holding him upright. Forward onto his knees in the snow, both hands pressing against the frozen ground, the broken amulets scattered around him in pieces. He looked up once at Lyriel. She did not look away. She let him see her face. Not triumphant, not cruel, not even angry. Just clear. The face of someone who has finished carrying something heavy and put it down for good. The wolves knelt, across the plateau, one by one, then in groups, then all at once. The Silver Fang army went to their knees, not from compulsion, from the specific, involuntary recognition of something larger than any of them had expected to witness today. The vampire shadows descended and knelt too, wings folding, heads bowing. In the unified silence of 2 peoples acknowledging something that transcended the war they had arrived here to continue. Lyriel stood in the middle of all of it, shaking slightly, eyes wet, silver hair wild in the last gusts of the fading blizzard, looking nothing like anyone's idea of a queen, looking exactly, entirely like herself. Cassian stood beside her, close enough that his shoulder touched hers. He said nothing. He did not need to. Some things are communicated only through the fact of a presence that simply refuses to leave. After a long moment, she turned to him. "Can forgiveness truly heal everything?" she whispered. He looked at her steadily, and the question stayed between them like a warm coal, unanswered and alive. She chose forgiveness over revenge when she had every reason to choose otherwise. 2 words. Would you have done the same? Same choice? Or let it burn? The answer to her question, and the justice that finally comes for Garrick, arrives in the next chapter. And it is quieter and more devastating than any battle. Justice, when it finally arrives, rarely looks the way you imagined it would. Most people, if they are honest, picture it as something loud, proportional, dramatic, with witnesses and a verdict read in a full room and the guilty party finally understanding what it feels like to be small. The kind of ending that satisfies you the way a screen door slamming in summer does. Final, complete. A sound with a clear beginning and a clear end. What happened to Garrick Ironfang was quieter than that. And somehow, because of that quiet, it was worse. He was stripped of his crown in the gray, flat light of the morning after the battle, on the same plateau where the Silverfang army had stood. Silas read the decree in a voice that made the cold air vibrate faintly at the edges. The broken, forbidden blood amulet was gathered from the snow and destroyed. Not with ceremony, not with theater, but practically and thoroughly. The way you would dispose of a piece of equipment that had always been dangerous and should have been dealt with years ago. The wolves watched in silence. Not the charged silence of people waiting to react. The silence of people who have just understood something they should have understood much earlier, and are not yet sure how to hold the knowledge of their own complicity. Garrick stood through all of it with his hands at his sides, golden eyes fixed on the middle distance. He did not argue. He did not plead. He had run out of strategies. He looked like a man who had used up every move he owned and was simply waiting now to see what shape the ruin took. His crown, heavy, black iron, more weapon than symbol, was lifted from his head and placed on a stone altar by 2 of his own former lieutenants. They did not meet his eyes. He did not flinch, but Lyriel, watching from the far side of the plateau, saw his throat move. Just once, the involuntary swallow of a man trying to get down something that will not go down and cannot be spit out. She knew that particular feeling intimately. She had lived inside it for 3 years. His sentence was this: to wander the eternal Frostlands alone. No pack, no throne, no army at his back, and no admiring eyes to reflect himself in. No one to manage or manipulate or keep small. Just the ice and the wind and the particular, unrelenting company of his own mind. Which, for a man who had spent his entire life arranging the world to confirm his own greatness, was the most complete devastation imaginable. Not a cage. An open door onto an emptiness he had never allowed himself to see before. Some punishments are a locked room. Some are simply the truth. Finally left alone with you, the wolves parted for him as he walked north, not out of respect, out of the specific discomfort of witnessing something they recognized in themselves, the consequence of following someone they knew was wrong because it was easier than saying so. They let him go. The blizzard took him, and he was gone. That evening, Ebon Nocturne Castle was lit from every window. Hundreds of black and silver candles, the kind of warm, impractical light that makes everyone look a little more themselves. Wolves and vampires stood together in the Great Hall for the first time in the history of the Frostlands, with the specific, uncertain hope of people who have just survived something and are not yet sure what comes next, but are willing to find out. Lyriel sat upon the throne of darkness beside Cassian. She did not look entirely comfortable there. That was one of the first things people noticed. and would quietly love about her for the rest of their lives. That she carried the weight of the throne with visible care, without pretense, the way an honest person carries any responsibility that is real and heavy. Thrones can do two things to a person: expand them into something unrecognizable, or simply reveal who they already were. Lyriel, it turned out, was exactly who she had always been. Only now she had the space to be it fully. She rose. "Today I am not simply reborn," she said. Her voice did not thunder. It was the voice of someone who had earned what they were saying through the kind of experience that leaves marks, who did not need to announce the cost because it was already visible. "I have learned that strength is not the absence of breaking. Strength is what you find inside yourself after you have broken. When you look at every piece, including the dark ones, and you choose to stay whole anyway." She looked out at the hall. Blood does not make a family. Choice does. Love does. The only bloodline that lasts is the one you build by choosing each other, again and again, even when it would be easier not to. The new blood covenant was signed that night, not by conquest, not by force, by two peoples who had seen the alternative and chosen differently. Silas sealed it with the old words. The living darkness in the hall shifted, turned warm at its edges, turned the particular amber of a house lit from inside on a winter evening when you are coming home after a very long time away and the lights are already on. Cassian leaned close. "You answered your own question tonight," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" "In the snow. You asked whether forgiveness can truly heal everything." He looked at her steadily. "Look at this room." She looked, and for the first time, she did not have a counter-argument. She rebuilt a whole world tonight. But there is one place she still needs to return to. And what she does there will be the moment this entire story has been building toward. The truest healing has not happened yet. She needs to go back to the very edge where it all began. And what she does there, in the last light of the vampire moon, is the moment you will not forget. She went back to the abyssal cliffs, not because anyone asked her to, not because it was on the official list of things an eternal sovereign was supposed to do in the days following the forging of a historic covenant. She went because she needed to stand at the edge again. The same edge, the same drop, the same freezing air, and feel the difference between standing there because someone pushed her and standing there because she walked there herself. The body knows things the mind takes time to catch up to. She needed her body to know this one. Cassian came with her. He did not ask if she wanted company. He simply walked beside her through the snow-covered path winding up through the old pines. His wings folded, his breath making small, quiet clouds in the cold. She was glad of the sound of his footsteps alongside hers. There is a particular comfort in a presence that asks nothing of you, requires no explanation, no performance, no version of yourself that is more acceptable than the real one. Just two people walking in the same direction in the cold. The frostlands stretched below them in every direction under the vampire moon. Enormous, close-hanging, silver, flooding the ice fields in long, clean lines of light and shadow. The blizzard was gone. The air was clear and absolutely still in the way only genuinely cold places get. The kind of stillness that is not empty, but full of the weight of something very old holding itself quietly. Lyriel walked to the exact spot. She looked down. The void was still there, deep and dark and vast, entirely unchanged. The cliff did not care what had happened here. The ice held no memory of it. The world had moved on with the indifferent efficiency of the natural world. which does not observe anniversaries, or carry grudges, or keep records of what was lost where. But she remembered. And standing here now, on her own 2 feet, by her own choice, the essence quiet and settled in her chest like a hearth fire that has finally found its proper size. Remembering felt different, not smaller, not painless, but hers, a memory she owned rather than one that owned her. She breathed in the cold air and let it out slowly, far out across the ice fields, far enough that she would not have seen him without the vampire sight that was hers now. Clear and unhurried as moonlight, a figure knelt in the snow. Garrick. He was not moving, just kneeling in the white expanse, facing the distant shape of Ebon Nocturne Castle as it rose above the cloud line. The look of a man inventorying what he once had and what he chose to do with it. The look you see on someone who has sold a house they should have kept and is sitting in the driveway of their new place in a city they do not like. Adding up all the small decisions that accumulated into this one. His lips moved. "I threw away a crown," he said. To the snow, to the silence, to no one at all. She heard him. She did not respond. There was nothing left to say to him, not because she was still angry, and not because she had absolved him of anything, but because the conversation between them was genuinely over. In the way a conversation is over when both people have finally said the true thing, even if one of them said it too late and in the wrong direction. She turned away. Lyriel raised one hand, slowly, the way you would raise it to feel for rain, or to test the weight of something you are not yet sure you can hold. The essence moved outward from her fingertips in warm ripples. Not darkness, not the cold, overwhelming tide of the blood eclipse. Something she had not known she could produce until this moment. Understood instinctively the instant she tried. She transformed the snow, not melted, transformed. Each flake catching warmth from inside itself, shifting from white to a soft, living gold, falling across the frostlands in a quiet cascade of light that was warm without being fire, bright without being sharp. The light of a kitchen on a Sunday morning. The light through curtains you have had for 30 years that filter the sun in exactly the right way, and you have never been able to explain why you love them except that they do. It spread across the ice fields in every direction. It reached the wolves and the vampires stationed along the tree line, and something in the quality of it, not commanding, not compelling, simply generous, made people lift their faces toward it. It reached Garrick where he knelt, and for one moment his frozen expression softened into something younger, something that might have chosen differently given different priorities. She did not romanticize it. She saw it clearly. And then she let her eyes move on. She turned to Cassian, for the first time, unhurried, unguarded, starting in the eyes before it reached the mouth. She smiled. "Darkness never abandoned me," she said softly. "Because I am both. I always was." She took his hand. His fingers closed around hers. Steady. Certain. The way they had closed around her in free fall over the abyssal cliffs on the night this all began. Like something that had always known where it was supposed to be. And forgiveness has set me free. Not from what happened. From the weight of carrying it alone. The light fell across the frostlands like the first genuinely warm day in April after a winter that went too long. Like the phone ringing on a quiet Tuesday evening from a number you were beginning to think you might never see again. Like the particular, irreplaceable relief of being caught, of discovering after a very long time of not knowing that you were worth catching all along. This story teaches us one specific thing. Someone, a spouse, a grown child, an old friend, maybe someone you gave the best years of your life to, may have spent a long time making you feel smaller than you are. Not always with cruelty, sometimes just with silence, with not noticing, with choosing something else, repeatedly, over you. And you carried that. You folded it up and kept it close, the way Liriel kept that little square of linen, because it felt like evidence of something true about you. It was not evidence of anything true about you. Here is what you do instead. This week, not someday, this week. Take out a piece of paper and write down 3 things you did well that no one ever thought to mention. Not grand things. The neighbor you checked on after the ice storm. The grandchild you sat with on the phone for 40 minutes when everyone else was too busy. The meal you made from scratch on a Tuesday for no reason except that it mattered to you. Put that paper somewhere you will see it. On the refrigerator, next to the grocery list, on the bathroom mirror. Not as a trophy, as a correction to the record. Your worth was never located in how one person chose to see you. It was in every quiet choice you kept making. For others, for yourself, while no one was watching. That is not nothing. That is everything. If this story reminded you of someone, a woman you love, a woman you have been, a moment when someone underestimated you and you found your way through anyway, leave her name in the comments. Or just the words, "This is me." We read every single one. The author is a flesh and blood human who spent hours living alongside these vampire characters. It was a real person who cried, felt fear, and trembled while writing every line. AI merely provided gentle assistance to make the story flow smoother and more captivating.